Ryba is a former high school math teacher turned screen time strategist, mom of two, soon to be three, and the author of How to Stop Scrolling. Drawn from a background in education, statistics, and psychology, Ryba helps people reclaim their time, attention, and sense of self in a tech-heavy world. Her approach is refreshingly compassionate, offering no shame, which is good, no detox, just honest insight and gentle guidance for those struggling with endless scrolling, which certainly applies to me. She's half Japanese, plays violin, writes evening pages on her website, and describes her superpower as making people feel seen and heard. Really believes that understanding why we can't stop scrolling is the first step towards reclaiming our attention and our lives. Thank you so much for joining us. I've already enjoyed our conversation. I just thought I better hit record at some point, otherwise we'll keep going without it.
Thanks so much for having me.
I'm going to change the first question then, based on what I just said. So, why can't we stop scrolling?
I think scrolling is the easier answer always, right? So there's so many reasons that we can't stop scrolling. Part of it is logistical. Let's say you're in the airplane and you're bored. Your phone is in your pocket. Your book is in your bag under the seat in front of you. It's literally easier to just grab the phone from your pocket, right? There are like often the logistics, and the phone is very convenient. It's always there and it has everything on it. But it's also the easier choice in a slightly deeper way, in that it is passive. You are not choosing what to do with your time. You're letting it go by. And when we are autonomous, that also comes with holding ourselves responsible for the consequences, right? So if you decide that you want to start a new company or write a book or do all these big things, if the thing flops, that's all on you, and that can be a big weight to bear. Whereas it's so much easier to just scroll and say, oh yeah, I could do that, but I hadn't gotten around to it. I just don't have any time. So I do think a big part of it is also because when we're not scrolling, we have to really look at the mirror and see who we are. And a lot of people prefer not to do that. They might not realize that that's what's happening, but I do think that's a big part of it, is you need to get to know yourself when you're not scrolling.
And a lot of people, and there's research out of the US. They had I'll get it wrong, but a group of college students that were asked to sort of sit in a room with nothing to do for an hour, and only like 50% of them made it. And I think it was this fear of not having something to take your attention. Is that a big part of it?
And what do you mean by they didn't make it? They were able to like tap out of the...
No, well, there was from memory. It was there was something in the room where they could either administer a mild electric shock or something negative, just some.
But it was negative.
Yes, it's some experience, and I think 51% of them hit the button to get because
they were so bored.
Yeah, to get
some stimulation,
cold water in a fence or whatever, just something that actually, oh my gosh, I'm alive, I'm here, I'm doing something. Is that part of the? Is that a similar element to why?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I mean, we as humans, you would know this much better than me, but we are craving stimulation. We crave hits of dopamine, so if that is available to us, we are going to take it. I mean, I think that if they were in that room for an hour without a choice, then they would survive it, but we as humans, we can't help ourselves. And so if it's there, I think we're going to go for it. That doesn't necessarily mean it's good for you, which is shown with this experiment. If, it's the electric shock or the water in your face, humans just can't help themselves. And I think that's useful to be aware of, because when you notice it about yourself, then you're more likely to say, well, my knee-jerk reaction, my instinct is to want to pick this thing up or to give myself the electric shock. But let me zoom out and think about it beyond just an animalistic instinct.
So you went from teaching high school math, very focused on precision, logic, the right answers, I guess, to becoming a screen time strategist, focused on attention, scrolling, connection. Was there a particular moment or experience that made you make the shift, or was it something you've been thinking about for a while? What drew you to this focus?
So I do think that it's a space that I've always been curious about. And I feel like increasingly it's something that I felt to me was so obvious that we shouldn't be letting it eat up so much of our time. And yet I see so many people that are very intelligent that, can't help but get sucked into it. So that in and of itself was always a point of interest to me, but there was a, a s- a moment that really made me decide to write the book. I don't know the exact date, but I could literally find it on a calendar for you because it was so specific. I was in St. Louis for a weekend visiting a friend, and I woke up early in the morning and I went for a walk around St. Louis, and I was getting like a coffee or something. And while I was walking out of the door, as always, I try not to use my phone unless I need it, you know? So if I notice that instinct of I'm just pulling my phone out of the pocket, I ask myself, wait, why is that happening? And I'll just put it back in my pocket, you know? So I was intentionally making sure to not use my phone while I was exploring St. Louis, which I've been to a few times. And while I was walking out of it was a smoothie shop, I saw this interesting looking store across the street. It was called Provisions and it was closed, but I thought, that looks like a very interesting shop. I want to go there later. You know, very, very simple. This is not like a crazy dramatic story. I saw a store and I wanted to go. So later, after lunch, we went to the store. The three of us, my husband, my friend, and I, we went to the store. It was very interesting. There were interesting books. I met the shop owners. I asked them about how they choose and source their stuff. It was just like, you know, again, not like the best day of my life or anything, but it was a place that I went to and I enjoyed. And I realized in that moment that if I had had my phone in front of my face while I was walking out of the smoothie shop that morning, I would never have noticed that store. I would never have known it existed. We never would have gone to it. And so it was just such an example of like the two different possible universes that would exist if my face is stuck to my screen versus if my eyes are open and I'm just looking around outside where I can connect to people. You know, I'm only in St. Louis for this one weekend. I will never have the opportunity to talk to this shopkeeper on this day ever again. You know what I mean? And I'm losing that for what? To scroll Instagram for, you know what I mean? It was
Yeah.
so obvious to me. And it was it was an example that really made me think, okay, this is so important. This is how I want to live my life, noticing things. And then, you know, speaking of autonomy, I saw the store and I wanted to go to the store. It doesn't sound groundbreaking, but it is because so many of us are missing people, missing stores, missing opportunities everywhere because we're just not paying any attention. So that's when I thought, okay, that morning after I saw the store, I thought, okay, I want to maybe make some sort of framework for my family. You know, I want it, this feels solvable. You know, the phone was engineered to be addictive. So that means that there must be some way that I can reverse engineer this. You know, I thought like there must be best practices. So I was thinking in that way. And then I thought, okay, if I'm going to create a framework, I might as well turn it into a PDF and email it out to my friends unsolicited. I'll be like, hey, I'm giving this to you. And then I thought, okay, well, maybe there's a need for it. And then it turned into a book. So that's kind of where it originated from, Provisions in St. Louis. Yes.
Wow. Literally, yeah. The sort of the first line is, one day I went for a smoothie.
Yeah.
And then literally the whole hundreds and hundreds
And
of
then I wrote a
pages.
book. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I think one of the things you say is your superpower, which I really love, is making people feel seen and heard. And I do think one of the challenges we have in society right now is a lot of people aren't seen and certainly aren't heard. And I wondered, what do you think we're in danger of, or what have we perhaps already lost in terms of genuine human connection and empathy?
I mean, I'm hopeful that we can regain some of it, but I do think that something that we really lose with our cell phones is tolerance of others. You know, our phones are really individualized, right? We all have our own algorithms, we all have our
Yeah.
own feeds. And so it makes us unable to tolerate other people and their needs, their choices, their interests. So when I think about when I was in high school driving around with my friends, like we would have music on and we're all like listening to the same music in the car, right? Whereas often when I see high schoolers or college students together now, they all have like one headphone in because they're together, but they're all listening to their own thing, you know? Or when you get into an Uber, you might sigh and say, ugh, this guy's playing music. I don't want to listen to his music. I want to listen to my music, you know? And the less tolerant we are of other people, the less likely we are being able to spend time with them. The less likely we are to be able to learn from them, to be curious. And they're certainly not being seen or heard, right? And yet, so many people feel lonely. They feel like they're not seen or heard, but then they don't want to reciprocate that. And so I do think that the fact that the phone is so highly individualized and curated for us is a little bit dangerous. But there are new changes that are happening. I think people are craving connection. They're craving a little bit of a slower analog lifestyle. So one example of that is vinyl. Like it started out as something being kind of like trendy, oh, like I'm so cool, I have like a record player now. But I find that the unexpected fringe benefit of that is when you put the record player on, everyone can see what's happening. You're not controlling it from your password protected cell phone where people can't change the music. It's on the record, and then someone, when it's done, can flip it from side A to side B, and it's something that we can share. It's something that we can hold. So I hope that we are going to go back in the other direction, but the connection, the tolerance, it's more effortful. And so that's why a lot of people don't do it.
The record player is a great example. Just saying, my daughter's just come to university, and she took her record player with her, and I think that sort of dominates that common living area rather than Bluetooth.
That's amazing.
Because there's people go out, they go to a charity shop, they'll find I found this, and just quite random things. And I think, for people of my age who sort of grew up with records, there's certainly there's a different tone and warmth to the record, but there is that experience of putting it on, putting the needle down, putting the clothes down, and all that sort of stuff. And getting the speakers in the right place. It's much more of a sort of active process rather than just scrolling through and flicking whatever's on your Spotify playlist or whatever.
Definitely.
Which is very different. Well, one of the things that we're seeing in some countries around the world. So I said before, my wife's Australian. Australia's just banned social media for under 16s. Spain's done the same. France has done it for under 15s. We had an edict here recently, something similar. But the one here was that our education minister has written to all schools saying smartphones shouldn't be allowed in schools. And I wondered if, and a lot of these questions are very big questions, so I apologize for that. But I wondered if you thought governments or people are getting it right in terms of distinguishing between social media as one thing they're trying to ban versus the smartphone itself as a device. And I think we all know that people can get around bans. 15-year-olds are pretty tech savvy, for goodness sake. But I wondered what you thought about the ban on social media or the ban on smartphones in certain locations.
So like banning social media versus phones?
Yeah, well, in Spain, the technical decision actually is social media that's the issue. So we're banning social media for under 16s. So I think there's like 10 social media platforms under 16s can't access anymore. But nothing about limiting how much time a 12-year-old can spend on a phone, on a device as such.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that, so when I think about time spent on a phone, you can almost think of it as your digital diet, right? So just as with our regular diet, there's calories, which you could equate to the minutes that you spent on your phone, but then there's also the carbs, the fats, the proteins, what are the micronutrients, what's the sugar, And I do think that there are different qualities of content that you can consume. And of those, I do think social media is one of the worst things. That being said, I would not give a 12-year-old unlimited access to a phone. I think a phone in and of itself, even just the internet, there's so much to it. I also think how quickly your phone reacts can't be great. I think there's also the opportunity cost of what you could be doing otherwise. There are kids that are learning math and other subjects on tablets, and they're writing a lot less. And the argument is that it's data driven. You know what all your kids are doing. You know which kids can add and which kids can't quickly. But I used to teach high school math, and I've used these sorts of programs before, so I can tell you that sure, okay, if I give them a problem set online from a bank of problems, it's useful in some ways, but I can also tell you that without that, I know which of my kids can do what. And so when people say you need the data, I am a little skeptical of that. And I think that sometimes there's more data that we can consume anyway. When are these teachers analyzing this data? I'm not blaming the teachers. I'm just saying that there isn't time for them to then analyze this data anyway. So that argument to me, it doesn't stand. But anyway, the reason I bring this up is because these kids are using the tablets at a young age to start to learn math. they don't get all the practice that they need to hold a pencil and to write, so we're losing all of these things. So it's not just that we're consuming the thing, so again, if we return to the food diet analogy, it's not just that they're eating the junk food. It also means that because of that, there's no space left in their stomachs for vegetables and fiber, et cetera. I mean, I personally think that the less time, the better. I don't think that the phone in and of itself is evil. I think it's a tool, but it has to be used like a tool. I feel the same way about all tools, about a calculator, about AI, right? Like, sure, a calculator is useful, but if you use a calculator for everything, you're going to find yourself using it for 2 + 4. That seems silly. So in the same way, sure, of course, I'm going to use my cell phone to pay for parking. I have to. They only accept the app. I'm not going to just get a parking ticket and say, well, on my principles, I never use my phone. I'm not going to show up to court and say, but I don't use a phone. I understand that it's a necessary part of modern life, and that is what makes it tricky, because we can't just throw it away. But I think most of what anyone uses their phone for is unnecessary, and I challenge that thought when it does come up, because it's easy to want to be defensive and say, well, I think that I'm mostly just checking my email and doing productive things, blah blah blah. I'll challenge that. I don't think you need to check your email 20 times a day.
I really like the analogy comparing it to food and our diet. It makes complete sense when you say it like that. I do think there's also we talked about young people. Obviously, young people start getting phones, which is fine. But I think at the other end, when you get to, I think about my parents both died in the last couple of years, sadly. But my mum in particular, she died. She was sort of 77 when she died. She had dementia, but for quite a few years before that, she was very cognizant and very, very, very lively and very focused. But she really didn't want to, or didn't have the desire to download a banking app onto her phone. Where so many times you go into the bank and say, well, just download the app and you just do this, and she said, well, I don't want to do that. And in the UK, I'm not sure in the US, in the UK, so many local bank branches are closing. It got to a stage where her nearest bank was like 20 miles away.
Wow.
So, but she wouldn't and couldn't. She couldn't do it on her phone unless somebody would have thought, saying, right, click on this app. No, don't press don't press transfer now. No, don't, because before
it's
you know
hard.
It really is for older people that perhaps
Definitely.
I didn't grow up with a smartphone, but people, even my parents' generation, that certainly didn't grow up with smartphones or digital devices, or people that just don't want to. I don't want to do everything on my smartphone. So many companies, institutions, governments, for goodness sake, push us towards having to use our smartphone to do different things, and that's really hard. And I agree. Have you had people reach out to you with similar sort of concerns, or companies are saying, well, gosh, we'd like to not be able to do this, but how do we almost wind back where we are, where everybody has to have an app to do things?
Yeah, that's really tricky, because it's everywhere. It's, as you were saying with your mom. I mean, that reminds me a little bit about like continuing the food analogy, like vegetarianism. So if you don't support the meat industry, there's not a ton you can do as one person, but every time you don't order meat at a restaurant or you don't buy it at the grocery store, then you're kind of, taking your vote, giving your vote on what sort of society you want to see. And so I think that that's sort of the only thing we can do is if we want a phone that uses, if we want a society that uses phones less, then we need to, as they say, be the change you want to see in the world. There are things that are not supported unless you have a phone, and that may be the case, but that doesn't mean it's not black and white. That doesn't mean we throw our hands up and say, well, I guess I just have to use my phone for everything, So I think sort of voting for it in ways that we can with our behavior is the only way I see forward. And then, depending on how passionately one feels about something or how much time or resources they have, they might be able to, join organizations, or there are people out there that you can join and support if that's something that is important to you. And I definitely encourage that.
Yeah, it's
but it's systemic. It's challenging. Yes,
it is. You get to a place where you think, gosh, I'm almost without choice, really. So you end up almost almost businesses taking the alternative step where banks will say, but we offer free lessons on how to use an app. It's not really the point. I don't want to use the bloody app.
Right.
That's the challenge, really.
That's very challenging. Yeah. Especially with the example with your mom.
One thing I really liked about your book, and it's very different than other books I've read, that you don't shame people. You don't say, right, lock your phone away for 23 hours a day. It's just about honest insight and guidance. And I wonder why you chose compassion over judgment or mandating.
I mean, I think the first thing is that compassion works and shame doesn't. So first, it's purely from just, it's not going to be effective. And I think, I want people to be able to make their own choices. And that includes, so that means listening to themselves and not others, including me, so only you yourself know best what you want and what you need. You have to be honest with yourself, but I have high expectations of my reader and my readers, and I believe in them, and I know that they can do that. And so being compassionate with yourself and also understanding that there are so many variables that affect every single action, and not just you, I think makes a really big difference, because again, going back to why it works, if you're using your phone because you're in a situation, let's say you're in a doctor's office waiting room and there are no magazines, there's no TV because most people are just on their phones. You expected it to be a 10-minute wait. It turns out to be a 2-hour wait. And then you're on your phone. Let's say later that day, you're kicking yourself and you're saying, oh my God, my New Year's resolution was to be on my phone less. And yet I spent an hour and a half on my phone in that waiting room. How does that help anybody? Or you could say, well, that was really annoying. Now I know that sometimes I have to wait for longer than I expect at a doctor's office. What can I do next time? Should I bring my Kindle? Should I call a friend? Should I bring my work laptop? So it's not just compassion though, because it's not just saying, oh, that's okay. It's saying, oh, that's okay. What will I do next time? Whereas if I'm just shaming myself, I just feel bad, and I don't need that. And no one does.
No, it's the same as food, isn't it? You might give in and go to that fast food place one time. There's no point getting home and feeling terrible about it. It's like, well, I probably won't go there again for another few months. That's fine.
Exactly.
But it's yeah.
Which of course is sometimes easier said than done. It's hard not to be angry with yourself.
And the people that have designed phones and apps and the internet, they're very clever people, and they've done very clever things to keep us scrolling, the refresh thing, the likes thing, all of those things that they could turn off, but they know they're not going to turn them off, because that's why people, almost the stickiness of their app or their device or that. And then the fact that time seems to move differently when you're scrolling. You scroll and think, oh my gosh, that wasn't 5 minutes, that was an hour and a half. Time somehow it changes. I'm not sure what happens to it, but time somehow goes very differently when you're just mind numbingly scrolling through things. One of the other things I want to talk about, and this is something I've always thought is true, so I'm glad that you've echoed what I've said, is that we have this sort of attention residue where when we switch tasks, we don't immediately close off everything about the last task and go to the next one with a sort of clean slate. We're taking little fragments of what we've been doing with us. And I wonder what you thought about how that impacts our ability to focus on particular things, whether we're carrying the residue of what we've just been doing with us, and the fact that if you look at our phones, it not only will it tell you how long you've been on the phone, but how many times you check your phone. So if you check your phone, I don't know, 4 times an hour, 10 times an hour, whatever, you don't immediately go back to that sort of pure state of reading, researching, doing homework or whatever. You carry something with you from that small interaction.
Yeah, so switch costs are huge. There's lots of research on switch time and switch costs in terms of when you're going from task A to task B and then back to task A, you lose time because your mind has to get back to what you were doing. And often the rate of mistakes also increases. And there was a study done, I can send it to you later, but I think the loss in work time was as high as 40%. So when you think that you're working on a task, but you're constantly switching, into interruptions and then back to your task, you're actually only using 60% of the time that you think you're spending on the task because you're losing 40% to switch time because it takes that long to get back into things. And yes, part of that comes from something called attention residue. Attention residue is when there is a residue of your attention. Part of your attention is still with that last thing. So that's why even if you spend the same amount of time. So let's say you spend 20 minutes looking at your emails once a day versus 20 minutes in 1 minute increments, checking your email while you're working. Let's say you get an email and it's from, I don't know, like your apartment management saying, plumber's going to be in tomorrow. Let us know what time works best for you tomorrow. And you think, okay, I got to check my calendar later and then get back to the guy. But you don't actually even do the thing and you go back to work. Now you're working and you're thinking, wait, so did I have a meeting tomorrow when the plumber's coming or no? And it's natural, that's going to happen. But you didn't even answer the email. You still have to go check the calendar and answer the email later. And so it's only costing you something with no upside. The only upside you're getting is that when you're focusing and you're working on something and it's hard and you want to give yourself a break, you're giving yourself that break, but at a high cost. And some attention residue is natural. When you are reading or when you're watching anything or talking to someone, your mind will sometimes wander, and that's natural. But we are all getting to a very high unnatural rate of attention residue because of this constant switching. This is something called popcorn brain that was coined by a man named Levy, where our brains are going pop, 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 pop because we're so used to the constant stimulation and changing. Oh, notification. Oh, check my email. Oh, watch this video. That when we get to regular life, sometimes your brain is still going pop, 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 looking for more things to pop up. And so your brain is just astounded that you're just supposed to be sitting here watching this movie without notifications because that's what you're so used to. So our brains are really adaptable. And so they can get really used to all these fast changes and all these notifications, but in the same way, you can also train your brain back the other way. So that's the good news, that if you feel like you are in the situation where you're constantly checking notifications, you're constantly switching between tasks, the first couple of days might be uncomfortable and feel strange, but you can actually think about, well, how do I actually want to live my life and do that thing?
Do you use sort of pen and paper a lot? Are you sort of write things down?
I do use pen and paper a lot, but I am also realistic, and I do sometimes use the Notes app on my phone. But I've configured my home screen. So on your home screen, on the bottom, how the default is there's like a camera and a flashlight that you can tap without unlocking your phone. So I've gotten rid of the flashlight. I do not need the flashlight. I don't know who does. People just always have the flashlight on by accident. And I have that icon changed to the Notes app. So if I need to write something down quickly, I can tap on that, write the Notes app, and I don't get distracted by my phone. But I do use pen and paper a lot.
That's the first thing I'm going to change when I come off the phone. I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah, you want it to work for you, not against you. The other thing I have on my lock screen is the weather widget. So I can check the weather without unlocking. I just glance at it and it will tell me the temperature. Whereas before I had that widget and I was going into my phone to go to the weather app. It's like a quest, right? It's like I'm trying to get to the weather and there are all these things that I'm trying to dodge on my way to the end of the tunnel, and it's hard. So one of the pillars in my book is design over willpower, and that's where I've designed my phone in a way that serves me.
Because there's probably very, very few people, if they admit it, go onto their phone to look for one thing, whether it's to check the weather or check the, check the time difference between two different countries or whatever, and then don't end up looking at something else. And suddenly 1 minute becomes 5 minutes, becomes 10 minutes.
Right. It's tricky.
Something else that's happened, and this isn't necessarily causation or correlation, but since you haven't have smartphones, we've certainly seen an increase in reported loneliness. With in the UK, something like 31% of men say they haven't got a close friend, 40% saying they only have sort of either less than 3 friends. We have a much bigger incidence of people living by themselves, etc., etc. And I'm not saying nobody's saying smartphones are causing all of that, but it came around at the same sort of time. And I wondered if our relationship with our scrolling habits and this device that's always there for us, that always gives us what we want, has an impact on our ability to form and maintain meaningful friendships, relationships in real life. That's a big one.
I think so, definitely. I mean, I do think that we can't forget COVID in all of this too. I think
Yeah, of
COVID
course.
and
Yeah, yeah,
smartphones,
good point.
um, they really cooperated in a way that was terrible for us socially, in that that is a time where people really got used to spending a lot of time on their phones. But again, self-compassion, not shame, but also we need to move forward, right? So, okay, you're used to spending a lot of time on your phone. Let's change that now. It's been a few years since the lockdown, but I do think in a lot of insidious ways, the phone does affect us in not having human interactions.
Mhm.
We text people instead of call, or now we might like instead of text, instead of comment. Um, we are just continuously seeming to get kind of less less in person, less direct. And I do think that using the phone is often easier than figuring out the logistics of, can you meet up next Wednesday? Okay, I can't do 6, can you do 7? Versus the asynchronous friendship of texting, where you get to it when you can. And that again goes back to tolerance and only wanting something that's individualized for you. So what's interesting about preferring a text message or even a voice note over a phone call, I was thinking about this the other day, is that with the phone call, you are asking someone of something. You're asking them to give you their time right now. I think that's why we're like, oh, why is this person calling me? Why couldn't they just leave it as a text? Because we think, okay, I can text them back whenever I feel like it, whenever it's convenient for me. I do not
Mm.
have to make space for their time, for their needs. And so I think in the same way, meeting up with someone can be challenging, because it's a few small hurdles of finding a time that works for both of you and finding a place that works for both of you, but that's two more hurdles than just sending each other texts. And so I think when we become aware of the fact that spending time with people, sure, can be a little bit more effortful, but is infinitely more fulfilling, then maybe people will start doing it.
Mm. 'Cause if people just think for a moment about the best times they've had in the last 6 months, year, whatever, I imagine very, very few of them are going to be spent on your own with your smartphone.
Right. That's a
I would
great way to
think
frame it. Yes.
I would think most of them are going to be with friends or loved ones or whatever. And it could be a memorable event, not for a great reason. It could be, but I always sort of wince a little bit when this is another screen in the way, I guess. When I see on television, I don't know, there's a Taylor Swift concert or the new Pope's being announced, and everybody's watching it through their phone.
Yes.
So
Yes.
you've paid, goodness knows, $1,000 for a Taylor Swift ticket. You pay for hotels, you pay for transport, you pay for all these things. You've had to sit online for sort of 18 hours to try and get a ticket, whatever. And now you're watching it through your phone.
Hmm.
It just feels very odd that
It
we
does.
almost don't let ourselves live in such a silly thing to say, live in the moment in a way.
Hmm.
Just because how often do those people again look at themselves? How often do they actually watch that footage back
It's
from
a
their
great question. It's a great question.
I think you've captured it. Almost the capturing it is the achievement. I've captured it. I've
Yeah.
captured that winning touchdown, whatever. But I'm probably never going to watch it because another million people have filmed it from different angles and better angles than I have.
Right.
Yeah. It
Yeah,
feels
I
like an
completely agree.
our reward is almost, yeah, I've captured that. I've sort of frozen that moment. But yeah, it's a bit like we take photographs on our phones. We don't print them out anymore.
Hmm.
They just live in our phones, don't go anywhere. It just feels that almost the capturing it is the thing we aim to do, as opposed to being there in the moment.
It's certainly tricky. And I mean, I think thinking about why we're capturing it in the first place is a really great place to start.
Mm.
Are you capturing it so that you can put this footage on social media? Are
Mhm.
you capturing it so that you can look at it later in life? Because when you answer those questions, you might realize that you don't need as many photos as you're taking, or videos. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think. I remember last time I took a video of something was at my daughter's dance recital in December. But my video is sometimes not on her because I was also watching, not through my screen. I kind of pointed it, made sure it was there, but then I was watching her because I thought I might want to look at this later. It's her first dance recital. And I'm not going to care about the quality of the video. Like, I'm just going to be able to see that she was tiny and she was dancing. And I know it's for me. I don't care about posting it or putting it on social media. So I don't care about the angles or anything like that. I just wanted to preserve this bit of our family history. So I think knowing why makes a really big impact. And then I think it's also, I mean, interesting to think about why people post on social media, right? It feels, again, people talk a lot about wanting to be seen and heard, and yet we're not seeing and hearing others. When you're posting something, when you're on that amazing vacation or something, like what is the point of that? Is that to say, look at me, here I am, you know? Because the other thing is, when people see that, they're not usually thinking, wow, this is such an amazing person because they're on that vacation. You know, we don't actually credit people or kind of rate them because of the vacations they've been on or the food that they eat. It reminds me of this story that my husband told me. I think he read it on a newsletter. It was called the Red Ferrari Paradox, where there are these two guys that are walking through a parking lot or something, and they see a red Ferrari. And one guy says, oh, like, when I am older and richer, I'm going to get one of these. Like, it's going to be so cool. Like, I can't wait to have one. I'm going to drive this red Ferrari, and everyone's going to think like I'm so great. And the other guy's like, so who do you think is driving this car? And the first guy goes, I don't care. Which is funny because he thinks that when he has the red Ferrari, everyone's going to think he's so cool. And yet, looking at this red Ferrari, he does not care about the owner of the red Ferrari. He's only thinking about when he personally will have it. So it's the same thing with a lot of these. That just made me think instantly of social media. You know, we're usually just thinking about ourselves, whether we're looking at other people's content or our own. And so we have to remember that that's how everyone else is going to be viewing our own content. But in terms of, everyone having their cameras out all the time, I think going back to why they're doing it in the first place is important. I mean, I think there's probably a big difference between taking a couple photos and videos versus putting the whole Taylor Swift concert on their phone. And I'm sure some people do that, you know, and maybe they rewatch it every day and it's amazing for them, but most people probably don't.
No, and I think with social media, if there wasn't a number of views or number of likes buttons on there, I don't think people post anything. People can say, I'll post it for myself, or it's my memories and things, but unless they must want a certain number of views, a certain number of likes, or just almost as validation for, they were having a good experience. Oh gosh, it is, my Ferrari is nice, or my holiday in Hawaii is amazing. It's sort of,
I do think so.
Or a sort of reward for people clapping you on the back, saying, haven't you done well?
Yeah, I do think so.
You talked before about our phones, and we all have our own individual algorithm. My phone will be different to yours, and my kids' phone is different to mine. Obviously, we've had AI coming in more and more closely now. AI is coming more and more into our devices. AI is prompting us more and more. Do you think or fear that will deepen our attachment to the devices? We feel that our device knows us better and better?
I think so. I think it's something to be careful about. I mean, people love using AI even for opinions, right? Sometimes when people are trying to make a decision, they might say, well, let me see what ChatGPT says. And and ChatGPT wants engagement, right? And so it is going to give whatever response it feels will keep you engaged and will keep you going. And so it's going to give you what you want. So if you have a challenging life situation where maybe you need to apologize to someone, your friend, your real human friend might tell you, yeah, you messed up. You should probably go apologize to that person. Whereas ChatGPT might say, well, I understand where you were coming from. Everyone makes mistakes. And so I can totally see that. It's kind of like the next level of and personification of this very individualized, self-centered device that you can feed yourself.
It's really interesting. I'm doing some research at the moment into our relationships with AI and what influence that has on how we behave, etc. And there are, I guess, there's lots of different types. So there's particular AIs where the AI is supposedly it's a character, or it's an AI boyfriend, AI girlfriend, where the intention is to make you connect with it and have emotional feelings towards it. But research shows that people are feeling the same, or certainly similar, with ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or Perplexity or whatever, even going as far as people that have a relationship with their Siri or with their Alexa or whatever. So even AIs that aren't designed to make us have a relationship are almost creating that relationship because they are feeding back to us in a very positive way in terms of their response, in a way that they think we want to hear. Most AI chatbots are very agreeable.
Right.
You almost sort of have to say
very
to
pleasant.
it, please disagree with me. Please. Well, no. I understand you want to disagree. It's very thoughtful of you to want that. But oh my goodness. And I just, so what I'm looking at now is what are the ethical considerations on companies as they develop this sort of AI? And my initial fears or thoughts are that I'm not sure it's something they really are considering.
No, I don't think so.
And I don't know how we guide them towards wanting to do that, or how we at least almost have that safety warning or safety label on there saying, look, be aware that this is going to make you feel this, think this, etc. It's a bit like we have on cigarette cartons now where smoking kills. I'm not saying AI kills, but AI can influence your behavior in a way you didn't expect. I don't know how do we get to that stage? Or do we need to get to that stage?
I think it's really tricky. I mean, I really think that one of the only things you can do is to use it as little as possible. That's what I do personally. I mean, I know it might sound extreme, but I do think that even if we know, okay, this is a computer, not a person, we as humans can't help but to personify things.
Yeah.
And this is something that is even talking to us, So I remember when I traded in, I don't actually wear an Apple Watch anymore. I just wear a regular watch because I don't want all the notifications and the haptics. But I used to use an Apple Watch to track all my workouts and all that stuff. And when I traded one in for the next one, I'd had the first one for 5 or 6 years. I really used it till I couldn't anymore. And this is pretty embarrassing to say. Well, I mean, I don't really care. I find it funny, but I really was like sad to let this Apple Watch go. This Apple Watch has gone through a lot with me. And like I took a selfie with my Apple Watch. I was like, goodbye, watch. And that's me like feeling attached to something because I feel like it's been through things with me, right? It's gone through my workouts with me. It's gone through my days with me. It's walked through the cities of the streets of Manhattan with me on days that I walked 8 miles in Manhattan or walked 7 miles in Paris or whatever. And it tracked all those things for me. And so I felt sad letting it go, and that's for a device that can't talk to me, can't give me opinions or anything, and yet I still had that sense of attachment. I mean, we have attachments to, there are plenty of college kids that bring their childhood stuffed animal to college, right? We as humans, I think we are social and empathetic creatures, and so we crave connection, and I think we sometimes even illogically create it where it doesn't exist. And so I honestly think that like we have no chance when it comes to something that can talk and is always agreeing with us. And I think putting like the sticker on it, just like with cigarettes, like I don't think it does much.
No.
I'm a little cynical when it comes to AI, I'll admit, but
In what way?
I just don't think the upside is worth it.
It's very interesting, and going off on a tangent now. But no, I sort of agree. I keep reading these articles about how AI has changed my life, and I can do 24 hours work with Claude in 15 minutes, and Perplexity runs my home and everything. And I've tried them all, and I don't think I'm really dumb. And I asked them the question, oh, I've read this, and it says this, and even the AI will come back and say, well, that's probably very specific for a coder doing a particular individual task, but actually we're still not able to access your files, check your calendar, all of these different things. So I do think it will get better, I guess, but I think
Definitely.
At the moment it does feel a little bit like the hype has run away with it. And it can do some amazing things. It can scan a mammogram better than a human eye. It can sort of detect cancers earlier than most people can. It can lots and lots of things, which are wonderful. But I think as this all-encompassing tool that we should be using for everything we do, it does still feel like it leaves a lot to be desired right now.
Yes, I saw somewhere someone quoted, technology is the answer, but what's the question?
That's my favorite quote of all time. Yeah, that was
Okay.
by
Okay.
an architect, bizarrely. And I think the same. I think it's almost AI is the answer. What's
Right.
the question?
Exactly.
Because you get CEOs that say, right, we've got to get on board with it. We've got to bring AI in. And you can see this AI company rubbing their hands. What does that mean? We're going to bring
Yes.
AI in. It's like
I
saying
mean,
we're going to bring in electricity.
right. Often when I don't know, like catching up with people recently, they'll be like, oh, well, I've been taking some courses in AI. And I always wonder that. I'm like, why? Like, why do you need it? And a lot of times they're like, well, I'm not sure yet, but I'm going to figure it out because they know it's the solution, but they don't even know what the problem is.
Yeah.
And of course, I can argue that you need to understand it in order to know what it applies to, and then you might understand what it can apply to.
Mm.
So I'm not necessarily anti-innovation, although when you look back at, times where there was lots of growth in history, it did often come with consequences. And so it's
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
something to think about. Sometimes humans are too innovative for their own good. And I say, why can't we just sit back and enjoy life a little?
There's that thing, isn't it, where it's just because we can doesn't mean we should.
Right.
It sounds very, very sort of simple thing to say, but you look at history so many times that if we'd actually thought about, well, should we be doing this? Things might be a little bit different now. It's really interesting. I think some of the, because of the topics that you taught, so I think if somebody learns statistics, somebody learns math, then that's a foundation for lots of other things. So it has value. Even though my son's struggling with math right now, it has value. But I think whereas if you sort of say, right, I'm gonna learn AI, it changes so quickly. What are you actually learning? Because
Right.
you're not really learning Python coding and how to go into it. You're
No.
learning how to use it, but actually then that's going to change very quickly. AI will become a product of its own devices in a way. But whereas if you
Yeah.
learn math or English or a language, you're learning something that is almost allows you to go on to the next level. It is a good foundation. That's a
Right.
big difference between, I'll do an introduction to AI. What are you introducing? What do you mean? It doesn't mean anything.
I'm not sure.
One thing you've said is that you're, and I might have got this wrong, so forgive me, but you're half Japanese, you're fluent in the language, but your children don't perhaps speak as much Japanese as you'd like, which frustrates you. And I think that's the sign of somebody that's sort of quite a perfectionist. And I wondered how you align that sort of perfectionism with how we judge ourselves about being perfect, because you've said even you have to take a page out of your own book sometimes, that you're not
Definitely.
the poster person for being the perfect smartphone non-user. So how do you handle not always being perfect or getting it exactly right every time?
Yeah, I mean, I consider myself a recovering perfectionist. I know that perfect can be the enemy of the good. And I think that black and white thinking or all or nothing thinking is something that can affect, or it really affects everyone.
Mm.
And so when we think about, teaching my kids Japanese, for example, yes, you're correct. I'm half. So my mom is Japanese. I grew up speaking Japanese. I grew up spending my summers in Japan. I grew up going to Japanese school on Saturday. So if you compare that to my kids' childhood, they're not spending 2 months out of the year in Japan. Their mother speaks English with their father. The environment is very different, and so it would be pretty unreasonable to have the same expectations in terms of their language abilities because their childhood looks so different from mine.
Yeah.
But it's still hard for me to just take like the middle ground and say, okay, well then they could just maybe be a little bit like fluent enough that they can hold a conversation, And so, but I think noticing all or nothing thinking is really important because by noticing it, I can say that. I could say, okay, maybe they can just learn a little bit. They don't have to be fluent. Versus my first instinctive response was, well, if they're not going to be totally fluent reading and writing, then there's just no point. What's even the point anymore, And you could apply that with, scrolling too, because if you have, I mean, I had a client that I worked with that he said that cooking was the downfall every evening because he would put the chicken in the oven or something and he'd have 20 minutes and then he'd spend that 20 minutes scrolling. And then he would say, well, tonight's a failure, so I might as well scroll for the rest of the night. And, when I told him, well, just because you're scrolling while the chicken's cooking, did you know that you could still do something else afterwards? And he was like, I never actually really thought of that. I kind of just decided that the whole evening was done for, a ruin, because we humans tend to hold ourselves to such high standards, and we think that we are in more control than we are. But it's okay. You just scrolled for 20 minutes, but that means that you could still do whatever you want with the last 3 hours from dinner to bedtime. So I think
Mm.
just being aware of the all or nothing thinking and trying to be, again, compassionate and kind to yourself when you notice it arising can make a really big difference.
It's very similar, back to food again, to a diet thing. If I'm on a
Right.
diet or a healthy eating kick, and
Yeah.
I'm out somewhere and I can't get into to eat, and I have a burger, or I have a candy bar, or whatever. That's it. That's it. Diet's gone. That's it. May as well give up. Forget it. And well,
Right.
it's just one candy bar. Just move on to the next day. But we don't. There's something in our head. So that's it. No, blown it. I'm everything or nothing. And it's exactly the same with the.
Yeah, I think we just have trouble holding two conflicting ideas in our heads. The idea of I ate a burger and I can have a relatively healthy day. Those two ideas seem to conflict. And so it's hard for us to hold them in our minds at the same time.
Mm.
Humans are just really bad at that for some reason. We just think if this, then not that.
Yeah, we're quite simple creatures, really.
We are. We really are. And learning about this has really taught me that.
Mm. If people listening to think, I would like to develop a new relationship with my phone, and I'm not going to be able to give it up completely. I don't want to give it up completely. But what is the first step somebody might take in having a relationship that they're more comfortable with their smartphone?
I think thinking about drop zones for your phone, where to put your phone, is really important. Yeah. So, when you get home, you probably have a spot for your keys, but a lot of people don't have a spot for their phone, and it's because their phone follows them around, and it shouldn't. So you want to have a daytime drop zone and a bedtime drop zone. So where does your phone charge at night? Ideally not in your bedroom. So that means you need to have a working alarm clock. Mm-hmm. And where is it during the day? You might have more than one drop zone. You might also have it in a certain spot when you're in office. But the point is that anytime you're doing something, you know where your phone is, and it's close enough that it's accessible, that when it rings, you can get to it. But it's far enough away that hopefully you even have to stand up to go get it. So you're fighting the friction. You're lessening the friction of not using it when you actually do need it. But then you're making it you're increasing friction for just the random autopilot pickups. And then I know you said one thing, but hand in hand with that is to change your notifications a little bit so that the important things do actually come through. So I use focus modes, for example. So during the day, almost all the time, I have all my notifications turned off except for phone calls. Yeah. So then I can actually leave my ringer on loud, and my phone can be in the room next door, and I'll hear it if it's ringing, but it's far enough away that I'm not actually going to go pick it up unless I need it. So giving your phone a home, and then toggling with your notifications a little bit so only the important things actually are notifying you can make a really big change, I think. That'd be where I start.
Yeah, there's something like, and the number's probably wrong, something like 80% of people are always within 1 meter of their smartphone.
I believe that, yeah.
Which, I have the same. I tend to charge mine on the bedside table. It's about 2 meters away. But people, it wasn't that long ago where we had home phones and they were downstairs and the phone would ring and you'd go and answer it. We managed pretty well then. They didn't seem to need to do much more than that, really. So just a couple of final questions if you've got time.
Of course.
One would be, a lot of the things that you explore, in your writing, you cover a vast amount of areas, really around meaning, which I really enjoy reading some of the stuff that you've written. And I wondered,
thank you.
How do you protect and nourish yourself? Because some of the topics you take on, they're quite heavy topics. And I wonder how do you look after yourself to make sure you're mentally able to go again and go again and go again, especially with a young family. There's a lot of life to do. And I wondered how you manage that and the writing and really get into these topics so deeply.
That's a great question. I do think part of it starts with self-awareness. So noticing when I am feeling depleted in however ways that I am. So last week there were 2 nights in a row that I ended up being up really late, and I decided as a result that I was going to cancel dinner plans tonight because I said, you know what, I'm too tired. I need rest. So kind of keying back when I need to. So whether it's because I need more sleep or time away from the news, there's a lot going on right now in the US, and I've
Yeah.
been looking at it, and I don't know sometimes how productive it is. On one hand, I want to be a very aware citizen and I want to do what I can. But sometimes when you're just consuming negative stories and you're not actually helping anyone, you're only hurting yourself. So I think part of it is awareness, and kind of rolling back when I need to. I also find silence to be really nourishing for me. I just want some stillness in my day every day, and that's something that I've noticed. So, if sometimes I'll wake up a little bit earlier than the rest of my family so that I have time for that, or I'll find pockets of it. It can even just be in the car when you get somewhere, like even when I'm driving, I sometimes just don't have any music playing or anything. I just want to sit in silence, sit in my thoughts. So for me, I mean, I do think that I'm someone that's stimulated a lot by sound. So you probably again need to key into what works for you. But I mean, I could go on. There's so many things. There's exercise, there's journaling, there's a lot of different ways that we can look after ourselves. But silence and awareness are probably like two really key things for me.
And how do you decide what things to share and write about in your evening pages work? So I just read the New Year's Eve one. It was about a husband meeting your husband called Andrew. Great name.
Yes, he is. Yeah.
Meeting a couple and thinking, oh gosh, did we really like them? Did we not really like them? Was it champagne? Was it what's it going to be like? And he actually had a wonderful time with them. So how do you decide what to explore in the writing that you share?
My evening pages are a little indulgent, so I sort of write about whatever I feel like writing. But I try to find things that I hope people will relate to or that can be helpful to other people. So with that New Year's Eve story, I wonder if other people, I think it's a pretty relatable experience of having the choice between the couch and going out. Honestly, it happened to me this past Saturday because I was going to a friend's birthday, and that was the reason one of the nights, 2 nights in a row, that I was up really late. And I thought, I don't really know a lot of her friends. I don't really feel like going. I'd rather just stay home. But I'm glad I did, because like you said, when you think about what are the best times in your life, her birthday party might not be one of my best nights in my life, but it might be one of her best nights in her life. And I want to be there for her. I want to support her. I want to be her friend. And so I'm going to choose to show up. So I thought that might be relatable. I have a bunch of not podcasts, blog posts, ideas stored. I do get a lot of them. So I voice record a lot of them. And then it's when I get around to writing them that yeah.
And do you think is a plan to publish them as a book? And are you writing another book? So obviously the book you wrote about scrolling so focused, so well written. I wonder, is writing seems to come very naturally. Well, maybe it does take you sort of months to write one of these podcast posts, but they're rather blog posts. But they flow very well. They're sort of
Thank you. Yeah, the blog posts, I try to get them done in like one day. But yeah, I don't really know what the plan for them is yet. For now, they're just a place to store and share just thoughts I have. And maybe if I notice, speaking of self-awareness, if I notice that I'm touching on the same topic over and over again, that will be data for me to think, okay, maybe this is something that I'm really interested in. In a lot of ways, I kind of consider my blog almost like my exercise routine. If you're an athlete and you're working on the sport itself, that's like my book, but then you're still doing conditioning, you're still doing running to kind of keep you in shape. And I think that's kind of what my blog post is for me. My blog posts are.
And my final question, and I wonder whether you're a planner for the future. Do you know what the next 5 years holds? Do you know what the future looks like for you?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm very open-minded and I'm open to change. So just in the past 5 years, I've moved more than 5 times. I've lived in Miami, Boca, Palm Beach, from New York, and now I'm in Greenwich, which is close to New York. So you never know, and I'm aware of that. And I think that's also, again, because I'm aware that we only have one life to live, right? So I'm trying to cram as much in as I can.
Yeah.
That being said, aside from promoting this book, I think I do want to spend a lot of time with my kids because they're really young and, they're growing. I do have one idea for my next book, so I'll probably slowly be working on that. Yeah.
Would you ever take the children to live in Japan for a year while they're really young?
That's a great question. I don't know. I'd need to think about it because it's so much goes into something like that with their schools and everything. I think I would love to spend, I mean, I'm planning on spending some time with them there in the next year or two. And I think time abroad, in some ways, I wonder if it would be easier when they are older. I'm sure there's pros and cons to both. I remember that when I was in school, there were two sisters that actually spent a year in Australia, and they really loved it, and they thought it was like such a cool family experience that they all experienced together. And one was in middle school and one was in high school when that happened. So that sort of opened my eyes to that possibility. Yeah, I don't know if I could do it with them so little.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, we're at the other end of our kids' age, I guess. I was saying before, mine are 16, 18.
Yeah.
And we went through the same thing. Gosh, we should be going to live in Australia for a year while they're really young. And then almost before we knew it, it was, oh, because they're coming into school now.
Right.
But then I do think when if you look back, when you're a little bit older, and, one of them might have been 10 and one of them might have been 13 and we went and lived to Australia for a year, that's going to have no impact on their future career prospect, life, whatever. It's just going to be, maybe they're going to be old enough to enjoy it or experience it more.
Right.
So one of my daughter's friends, her mum's Japanese, her dad's English, and they went to live in Japan when the daughter was 15 for a year.
Okay.
She came back to the same school, and she sort of carried on generally with the learning and stuff. But yeah, she loved it, and she got so much from it, and obviously her language skills improved massively. But it was, and actually at my daughter's school, somebody came here from South Korea for a year and went back to South Korea and sort of South Korea because her family was over here. So yeah, I don't think it is one of those things. I used to think, gosh, they've got to be so young it doesn't make any difference. But if they're so young,
then it doesn't make any difference.
Really,
right?
I'm not sure what are they gaining from actually the experience. But if they are old enough to learn something and think, well, actually, maybe I want to do this on my own 1 year, or it's just, I do think travel is such an amazing thing to be able to do.
Agreed.
At an age when you're a little bit older. I think
but
a lot
for now
of people,
we have. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just think a lot of people, I think maybe particularly in America, maybe this is unfair. I think a lot of Americans that I've met don't really travel outside of America until they retire. They do the 5 cities in 4 days European tour, and that's it. But I do think you do gain more empathy. I've been really lucky that I've worked or done projects in 40 different countries around the world. And some for a week, some for 2 weeks, some for 6 months, some for a year. But every time I've been somewhere, I've learned something that I hadn't expected to learn. Not about the job or the work, but just about the people, or for good or bad or whatever. But I do think traveling to different places is such a good thing to do, and doing it in person and not through your phone.
Right.
Well, thank you so much. I'm going to make sure my children listen. I'm not judging you, but just have a look at your relationship with it. Just check how much you're using it, what you're using it for. So I do think that's the big thing, isn't it? Be aware of what you're using it for. If I'm going somewhere in the middle of the night to pick up my son from a party, I need my phone for directions. I'm not saying, no, I'll get a map. I'll highlight it and then what? No, I'm using it for something sensible. Whereas if I'm sat on a train, and I got a train the other day, a few months ago actually, from somewhere in Italy to somewhere in Switzerland, because it was quicker than flying. And I sat for 3 hours on the train and looked out the window. Oh my goodness, the Alps and the views, and it was amazing. Or I could have sat on my phone, as many people in the carriage were.
And speaking of traveling, sometimes you see people that are traveling and then they're on Instagram while they're traveling. And I'm like, why are you here? I want to shake them. You're here for 5 days, take it in,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
For your time. You've been, very, very informative and very enjoyable to talk to. Appreciate it.